Hello and welcome back to another video. So for this one, I thought that I would go in depth in dissecting my most recent shoot, which is my Ironman video that I shot with a good friend Batu. So this was just to preface the entire project, this was basically just a fun project that I wanted to undertake to enhance my personal portfolio. So it was not a paid gig by any means, and it was basically just a fun way for me to get more experience under my belt and for Batu to end up with a pretty well polished video at the end of things. Despite not being requested to do this, I thought I would break down my timeline and kind of give you a general idea of the process that went behind filming something like this. So both like pre-production as well as the filming and post-production. So yeah, just to kind of start things off, I'll give you just a general overview of the timeline itself here. So as you can see, there's quite a few components, obviously maybe not as complex as some videos, but what I did was I decided to color coordinate all of the footage based on the given activity and shoot location. So for instance, the content of him cycling in his garage is a green or olive green or whatever you call that green, whereas the swimming component was an orange color. I find this just really provides me with an additional step of organization so that when I'm looking at the general overview of the timeline, I know exactly what theme goes into each color of clip, rather than just having them all a uniform color and getting absolutely confused when it comes to discerning which clip is which. And so another thing that I did was I tried to record and utilize a lot of the natural audio that we were experiencing in the shoot. There were certain aspects that didn't work out because of weather, wind, all that jazz. So I drew upon sound effects from online to match up with the clips. But for the most part, I tried to utilize the audio from the actual shoot itself. I just find this is far more organic and it just flows a lot nicer. It makes the process of editing a lot easier for yourself. Instead of implementing additional audio and sound effects afterwards. Obviously, it's been very beneficial to be able to draw upon additional sound effects because they can significantly enhance your actual project. But for this, for the most part, I was able to use audio from the actual given clips. There were certain ones like the swimming one and the cycling on the road, I just wasn't able to use the audio. The wind was just extremely terrible and the audio was just all over the place. And with the cycling component where he was cycling on the road, I was actually in the back of a truck. So most of the sound you were hearing was actually the truck itself because it was a pretty noisy truck. So you couldn't really pick up on much of the auditory sounds from the bike itself. But yeah, that being said, it's so important to have sound effects in your video. And just in general, the sound component is crucial. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna hop over to the pre-production side of things because I actually, for the longest time, didn't put as much thought and effort into the pre-production side of things. I was more, I don't know, as a young filmmaker, you get so excited about the prospect of going out and shooting things that you're passionate about and coming up with these concepts for videos that you completely overlook the pre-production work that needs to go into videos like this. So for the longest time, I would just go out, shoot, hope for the best, come back and try to edit something together, which does work sometimes, but I find can be a little bit more chaotic during the actual shoot itself. So for this video, I knew I wanted to actually plan things out more methodically. And from watching other YouTubers' videos, I saw them using a lot of different platforms to actually help them with the pre-production stage. And one of the ones that really stood out to me was Milanote. So I decided to give that a go, and I was thoroughly impressed by it. So yeah, Millinote, if you're watching this, feel free to sponsor me in the near future if you want another video. But yeah, so what I'll do is I'll hop into my pre-production page that I set up in Millinote. So yeah, as we can see here, I decided to break down the shoot components into 4 different categories. So there was a home section which incorporated the training in the garage. There was a cycling component, which was all of the cycling that happened on the road and in multiple different locations. There was a swimming component, which obviously happened in a lake. I could have done it in the ocean, but based on the day that we were provided with, an ocean swim would have just been completely out of the picture. It was just way too windy. The lake itself was extremely choppy, which made things very difficult. And then there was the running component. So the running component, initially we wanted to do 3 different locations. So we wanted to do a track, trail run, and an urban run. We ended up cutting that down to just the trail and the track. Obviously, from watching the video, you'll know that I only actually incorporated the track component. We did capture the trail portion, but the video itself I found was long enough and fleshed out enough that it didn't actually need the trail component. So I have all that footage, but yeah, just didn't end up using it, which I find tends to be the case. It's better to end up with an excess of footage than too little. You don't want a shortage, because then you have to go back to the person you're filming with and say, hey, can I borrow you for another day? And with this scenario, it wasn't a paid gig or anything like that, so it would have been maybe a little bit more forgiving. But if you have hired talent, it's a little bit more difficult. You don't have that lee room where you can just say, hey, I messed up, let's go shoot for another half day. So yeah, let's dive into this a little bit here. What I basically realized prior to starting to conceptualize this shoot was that I needed to put a lot more thought into the actual pre-production. And this meant actually planning out all of the individual shots. So I wanted to create a shot list so that everything flowed very smoothly come shoot days. And this is something that I hadn't really done prior to this. I'd always, heard of people doing it and had people emphasize the importance of it, but never really took the time to actually do it myself. And what I can say is that it makes a world of difference planning out your shots. Obviously, you can go as in depth as you want. For some of them, I decided to, note down what focal length, what lens I wanted to use, whether it be on a gimbal, tripod, handheld, you name it. But you can basically be as detailed or as vague as you want, but I find it's just very beneficial to kind of find some images from other videos that inspire you and you want to implement shots similar to that. With the home component, I wanted to really put emphasis on the solo mentality of the fact that he has to motivate himself to actually accomplish this training. And so throughout the video, there is that feeling of isolation where, it's him against himself. So it's like a mental game where he has to see if he's strong enough to persevere through the pain, through the discomfort, to actually see the end results come race day. For the home component, what I did was I actually rented a haze machine because I don't actually own one myself, which is something I really want to invest in after using one for this shoot. So I used a haze machine. We actually filmed the training component in his garage, which worked out perfectly. Initially, it felt a little cramped, but what I did was I decided I wanted to focus more on the close-up shots. So I wanted to focus on details such as his face, the exhaustion in his expression. I wanted to focus on like the gears of the bike, the derailleur, tires, all these little details that kind of made the viewer question what they were looking at, but also significantly add to the story itself. So then, yeah, as you can see, and there's certain shots that, I thought would have been cool, but we just either didn't have the time or it just didn't feel right to actually incorporate them into the video. So for instance, we didn't show a shot of him really getting dressed and getting ready for cycling. He basically was just on the bike. He put his shoes on and stuff, but as far as getting on his outfit, that was left out. And there's certain things that you kind of have to realize aren't as significant in your story and therefore can be left out. You don't want to incorporate every single detail. So you don't want to see him, getting out of bed, getting on his clothes, tying both his shoes. It sometimes ends up being painfully detailed. And instead, you can kind of cut from one thing to the next, as long as it makes sense, and as long as you're still getting enough detail to actually piece together what's going on. So then, for the actual cycling component on the road, what we did was probably not the safest of things, but ended up being in the bed of a truck, and I had my camera on a gimbal. So I was shooting out the back of the truck, and he was cycling on the road behind us. So with this one, I wanted basically to emphasize that feeling of being alone, essentially. I wanted to emphasize the fact that it's him on his bike by himself on the road. And he has to push through, the pain of going up these hills to then reap the benefits of going downhill afterwards. And I really wanted to emphasize the lush vegetation that is here on Vancouver Island. So the subtropical rainforest surrounding him on both sides of the road, along with the varied elevation too. So I found that there's a lot of ups and then a lot of downs. It's kind of, there's no continuity between it. So you don't get long stretches of flat here. It tends to be the case that you're going up and then you're going down for a bit, you're going back up, going down. So it's hardly ever very flat, which I find is very interesting for filming because it really actually pushes the athlete to try their hardest. Obviously, there are certain things where I wanted him to make it a little more overemphasized than it necessarily had to be. But yeah, the cycling component is sweet. And then there are certain shots where I actually ended up just filming from the side of the road, from the middle of the road, which obviously be careful if you end up doing something like that, because you want to make sure that someone's either spotting you or that there's no traffic coming. But yeah, so we got some shots that were stationary just to focus on him as the subject moving through the frame, which I found was pretty cool. And there was one shot in the video where he was saying that it can be lonely training for these Ironman events. And for that, I really wanted to capture that in a single shot. And I think what I used really isolated him and made him seem all by himself. The sides of the road, just with these tall trees on either side, and then this little cyclist going along the road coming towards you, basically just emphasizing or re-emphasizing the idea that he's out there by himself. And so I found what I've learned is that when you're shooting one of these videos, you want to have a story to tell. You want to have a story in mind. There has to be a certain timeline, and you also want your visuals to complement what the individual is actually saying. So if you have a voiceover, if it's like an interview style piece, you want these visuals to actually complement what the person's saying. So you don't want to have him saying that, it's a very isolated training, and then have him like surrounded by a big group of people. It just makes no sense. You want it to be logical, basically, and you want it to make sense to the viewers. You want it to make sense to yourself, obviously, as well. The swimming component was by far the most difficult one to film. I never actually swam. I've never swam before. No, just kidding. I can swim, just maybe not that well. But no, what I was gonna say is I've never actually shot someone swimming before. So it was really, I found this part to be the one I was most looking forward to, just because it was something new. I always love shooting new things that intrigue me and that I've wanted to try for a little while. And so, of course, we chose the worst possible morning to actually do this portion of the shoot. So what our plans were was that we were gonna go down to a lake and I was gonna be canoed around while filming, and he was gonna be in the water swimming. So it all sounded great, but obviously when we arrived at the lake, it was the windiest possible morning ever. So a lake that's normally still had waves on it, which made everything so much more difficult. So I felt bad for my brother who was trying to canoe me around. So he was paddling as hard as he possibly could, and we would maybe make it a meter forwards. That's about it. And then as soon as he stopped paddling, we'd probably go about 5 meters backwards. So that made it very tricky, because what I envisioned for this, as you can see here, is that I wanted to be filming alongside Batu as he was swimming. And so basically I had to work with the opportunities that I was given, which were few and far between, but I managed to actually get some quality shots that I was actually really happy with. And obviously I'm very grateful for my brother canoeing me around. And then also with this swimming component, I wanted to focus more on kind of the intimate side of things. So, after when he takes his wetsuit off, warming himself up, just kind of rubbing his shoulder, just that sort of thing that kind of draws the viewer in and adds a little extra emotion to it. So what I found is it's so important to instill these emotions both through visuals and audio. One without the other doesn't have the same effect as both of them combined. And then with the running component was honestly probably the most loose and unscripted portion of the actual shoot itself. I had some general concepts that I kind of wanted to achieve with the shots, but for the most part, I was kind of just riffing and kind of feeling it out, seeing what looked good in the moment, which is fine. Like, it's great to obviously have a shot list and a good sense of what sort of shots you want, but I think it's also good to improvise, and if you see something that looks like it would be visually appealing, then just go for it. And I mean, there's no harm in it really, as long as it doesn't take up too much time and make anyone too frustrated. But yeah, it's good to kind of add in your own inspiration on the spot as well. And so the idea for this shoot was that I wanted there to be a story component. So I wanted it to be kind of like a mini documentary style thing. So what I did was I prepared a number of questions that I could ask him. And so we just filmed these separately. I didn't want to incorporate any interview style footage into the actual video itself. I think it would have taken away from the visuals. Yeah, I prepared these questions for him, and then he answered them as best he could. And I was able to add that voiceover component to the video, which I find greatly enhances the general narrative of your video. As long as it, like I said, as long as it makes sense and it complements the visuals. You don't want it to take away from the visuals and distract people from what they're actually seeing. One of the things for the longest time that I would completely dread is actually finding the correct music for the video that I was creating. But basically what I realized is that it's so important in the pre-production stage to actually figure out the general mood that you want to set and the tone you want to set for your video, because then what you can do is then you can pick out the songs that you could potentially incorporate, and you'll have a good idea based on the shot lists that you've created and the scenes that you've laid out, what song will go where and how it will actually complement the visuals that you're seeing and shift the audience's mood and perspective of what they're viewing. So music is extremely powerful for drawing upon emotions. So if you put the right song in the right context, it could, for instance, make the viewer extremely happy. They could be laughing along with the main character, or it could make the viewer feel remorse or anger. Whatever it is, the audio and music significantly enhance the emotions that the viewer is going to feel. So for instance, like take a horror movie. If you switch off the sound and just watch the visuals, it doesn't have the same effect that it does if you were to just watch it as a normal movie with both the audio and the visuals combined. And so that goes for any video that you create as well. So with this one, I spent a lot of time actually finding a bunch of songs that I could potentially work. I could have probably spent more time and figured out exactly what scenes they were gonna go with, but I had a good idea of, you know, what sort of mood I was wanting to instill in people, and I found a number of songs that worked for that. Obviously, as you can see here, I didn't use the majority of them. I think I probably incorporated 4 or 5 songs, which, again, touching on that, it's so important to not just have one song for your video. I find if you just have one song playing throughout the entire video, the video becomes very stagnant and you'll probably lose the attention of your audience very quickly. So you want to incorporate multiple songs as well as a bunch of sound effects to really complement the narrative. Yeah, just find the right music that works for your video. So know ahead of time what sort of mood you're wanting to instill with this, whether it's, you know, a positive energy, you know, I mean, probably not negative, but whether it's like the character struggling throughout the video, whether it's them, you know, achieving greatness or whatever it is. Just know in advance what the tone is of the video you're creating, because this will help you immensely, both for your audio that you're choosing as well as the composition that you decide to shoot. So then, yeah, in post-production, I basically brought in all of my clips. I added them all into folders and then color coordinated them based on the activity that he was doing. I found that really benefited me, and it made my job for choosing the clips that I wanted a lot easier. And then also going back and viewing your timeline, you know what clip is associated with what color, so it's very beneficial as far as understanding the sequence of your timeline. So yeah, I basically brought in all the clips, I figured out which ones I wanted to use within the video, and then I brought in my audio, so then that kind of set the tone for the overall video itself. From there, I was able to kind of cut down certain clips, piece them together, and then make a timeline based on my pre-production with my frames that I had laid out, a timeline that lined up with that. So once I had all of the clips organized, then basically what I did was I just started coloring my clips. So I basically did a color grade, created a timeline. I'm by no means an expert when it comes to color grading. I was happy with the look I created here, but yeah, obviously no means an expert. So I'm still learning when it comes to color grading. I just like to watch videos myself and try to learn as much as I can. You basically just have to kind of watch videos, experiment, just take clips and play around with it. But I was happy with the look I was able to achieve in this video. I think it also complemented the tone I was trying to set. But yeah, so that's my kind of dive into this video. And another thing is basically I was working with a $0 budget. So just kind of playing around with what I had, and it's really achievable by anyone who has a camera. Just put in the time, make sure you're constantly learning. Like I try to learn something new every single day. If I don't learn something new every day, I feel like I'm almost disappointing myself. So just make sure that you're watching lots of videos, you know, trying new things and pushing yourself out of your comfort zone. Like basically what I've realized is you're not going to achieve what you want to achieve if you never get out of your comfort zone and just try it. Like most difficult component is actually starting. So a lot of the times people will get these brilliant ideas, they'll see something that truly inspires them, but then they won't actually take the first step in the right direction and start. So that tends to be the most difficult time, is at the very beginning when, you know, you're a little uncertain, but you have this great idea that you want to achieve. And so you just gotta say, like, screw it. The worst that can happen is it doesn't turn out, really no one cares. But yeah, just try something new, push yourself out of your comfort zone, keep learning. So that's all for this video. Hopefully you'll learn something from it, whether it be something just completely small or whether everything was new to you. But yeah, hopefully it taught you something or maybe inspired you to then go out and shoot something similar. But yeah, just keep creating. I appreciate you so much for tagging along in these videos, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.